Hello and welcome to the World Built Environment Forum webinar series. My name's Simon Rubinson and today we're going to be focusing on the construction industry, as I'm sure you're aware, and in particular looking at the issues around skills, productivity, and just how the construction sector generally responds to the demands being placed on it, not just now, but over the coming 5 to 10 years. And indeed, this is a global issue, so it's going to be something that resonates around the world, and I think is going to be a really interesting subject for discussion for the next hour. Um, Before introducing the panelists today, one thing I would like to highlight is a skills survey that RICS is actually conducting separately from this webinar. We really want to get as many participants or respondents to the survey as possible. It's the aim is that we will actually get quite granular with this survey, so it will really provide some useful insight. Now, obviously, you can take a photo of the QR code here and fill in the survey at your leisure. There will also be a link posted in the chat. So would really appreciate it if you are able to contribute to this survey, because it will really help us and hopefully help the industry as it attempts to gear up for one of the, I think, probably the biggest challenges it's had in its in terms of its history, just because of the demands being placed on it. Now, I should say that we've got a really good list of registrations for today's webinar. Last count, it was approaching 900 in around 70 countries. So I'm hoping it'll be quite a wide-ranging but also global discussion around some of the big issues. Let me start by then bringing forward our panelists onto the screen. I want them to say a few words about themselves, just so you get a perspective of where they're coming from. And I think, well, let me start with Rachel. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm happy to be here today. My name is Rachel Personius. I'm a director for Curry & Brown, and I lead our construction business intelligence and U.S. sustainability services. I'm excited to talk construction and some of the challenges that we're facing today.
And just as your expertise is the Americas, is that correct, really? Is that fair?
Yep, that's correct.
Great, okay. Holly, can I ask you to say a few words, please?
Of course, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are geographically. It's great to be with you today. I'm Holly Davis. I'm a major programs director at KPMG in the UK. I work in public and private sectors on the delivery of mega programs, so very impacted by some of the things we're going to be talking about today. I'm also the author of KPMG's quarterly infrastructure insights publications, which look at some of the economic and contextual factors which impact our industry.
Thank you very much, Holly. Kirk.
Yeah, hi. Pleasure to be here, and thank you very much. So Kirk Smith, I'm a director with Turner & Townsend. I run the cost management services across Germany and Austria, also heavily involved in Europe. So my area of expertise is Central Europe, you could say. I'm also the author, similar to Holly, of a Germany market intelligence report that does very similar things to what Holly does, takes a look at the market, the macroeconomics, what are we doing and how we look at going forward. So obviously, this is going to be a great discussion for myself and all the panelists.
Thank you very much. And then Will, could you just introduce yourself,
Yeah,
please?
thanks, Simon. Hey, everybody. Will Turton, founding partner of Turton Bond. I'm a quantity surveyor by trade. Been in the industry for about 19 years now, which is scary. So I'm based in New York, but as Turton Bond, we have offices all over America, and we touch many of different sectors. So everything from corporate real estate to tech and everything in between. So very much impacted across the board about a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today.
Okay, excellent. And I should add that we do have a final panelist. His name is Laik Hassan. He's based in Saudi Arabia. I know that he's been slightly delayed, but will join us as soon as he can. So I'm hoping that, we've got representations from Europe, we've got North America, Central America, and indeed South America is also up for discussion, the UK, and hopefully the Middle East as well. So covering large part of the globe. So really hopefully it can be a really wide-ranging discussion. Before we start, I would also say that we'd really like this to be as interactive as possible. And there's a chat function. We want to hear your comments. We want your questions. We will aim to get through as many of them as possible. And if we can't, we will ask the relevant panelists to try and get back to you with a response to any specific issues that you have. But please do feel free to contribute. It makes the conversation more interesting, and we want to learn and want to hear your thoughts. So look, before we really sort of perhaps delve into some of the more specific detail, I think it really be good to start with a general view as to how you're seeing issues in the construction sector at the moment. And look, I mean, I think when we had a brief call about this beforehand, I think I'd mentioned that I couldn't remember in my sort of time working in the sector, and I've obviously been around for quite a while. I couldn't remember a period when, globally, so much is being asked of the construction industry. It is almost like central to delivering growth. It's central to resolving so many of the big challenges world economies face. So really interested to get a feel as to how you see things are happening or what's happening at the moment. Kirk, could you perhaps give us a European view to start with?
Gladly, Simon. So obviously, in the past few years, there has been a downturn, both economically and in construction across Europe. That's being offset, of course, now with the geopolitical situation. Now, a lot of people are seeing this geopolitical situation and all the tariffs, and the uncertainty does breed uncertainty, which means, are people going to invest, and where are they going to invest? But what we're starting to see is the governments across Central Europe making choices. For example, in Germany, the €1 trillion invest that they're talking about and saying that they're going to take 50% of that and get into infrastructure. They're looking at heavy investments into defense, as well as getting into climate protection, environmental protection. This offsets and actually brings more market certainty and people wanting to invest more in these markets. Similar things are in the works across Central Europe, and we're expecting to see more of this happening. So I would say it's mixed, Simon. It's got a downturn from certain areas, but there is quite a bit of positivity that is starting to come back. And I guess we're going to have to see in the next 3 months, 6 months, exactly how this works out. So I guess I have to say kind of half-half at this point in time.
And just as a quick follow-up, because we do conduct a construction survey on a quarterly basis at RICS, and the feedback we were getting from Germany was perhaps beginning to reflect that sort of fiscal impulse. It was on the cusp in terms of when the survey was being done, but we were still getting quite negative feedback from France. Are you seeing that discrepancy or divergence?
There is, and I think this is partially, well, not partially, but almost fully with the German government, investing and saying we commit to invest over the next 12 years, €1 trillion. This breeds confidence.
Yeah.
And I think it then becomes France and all the other Central European, they need to also, now France did back in 2020 or 2021, I can't remember, commit to 100 billion or 109 billion in infrastructure. But we also need to take a look at the defense and everything. And this is also going to bring a lot more construction and a lot more certainty into the Central European market. So even though there is more in Germany right now because of that investment, there is still, I would say, a delayed reaction expected from the rest, but they are expecting, people are on the wait and see. What are they going to do in France? What are they going to do in the Netherlands and in the other Central European countries?
Okay, great, thank you. And I think it makes sense to just move on to Holly now because of the sort of close connection with Europe. So, how's that playing out in terms of the UK situation?
It's really interesting to hear Kirk's reflections about confidence because it's very similar to the UK. The market loves confidence. Investors want to be certain about returns that they're going to get. We're going to come on to talk about skills. Businesses want certainty about pipeline to know that they can make their investments within their staff. So similar to Europe, the UK has got some very significant infrastructure pipelines. So we obviously had a change of government last year, and one of the things that was committed to by that government was a very substantial house building pipeline, so 1.5 million new homes over the next parliament. We've also come into the new regulatory period for our power and utilities companies. And again, we're seeing some massive step changes in the sizes of those pipelines that those organisations are going to deliver. So there's significant scaling up of what water companies are going to be asked to deliver. We're going to have our first new reservoir in 30 years, for example, and investment in the water sector is going to be doubling in that next 5-year period. So it's been really positive to see in the sector those signs of confidence about those sectors that are going to experience growth. And Kirk obviously touched on defence as well. Thinking about the geopolitical stage, that's an area where we know that increased GDP spending is going to enhance the defence pipeline. So it's a similar picture in the UK.
Okay, that's really interesting, and perhaps it's sometimes a bit of that's a contrast, perhaps, from some of the woes that you're hearing about sort of government policy more generally in the UK. So slightly more positive messaging there. I think let's now turn to America, and I use that term because I think we might be able to spread beyond the US, but I'm really interested in the US because clearly it is such a big market and there's so much going on there at the moment. So sort of, Will, could you give me your thoughts and then we'll move on to Rachel's?
Yeah. I think from our perspective, probably similar to Kirk and Holly, we're very much seeing positive momentum. I think literally, like I touched on in the introduction, because we obviously work with a multitude of clients in various sectors. There's definitely some more emerging sectors than others, but we work with some of like the largest tech companies in the world, for instance, doing their corporate offices, and even they are now re-looking at not a wholesale return to work policy, but obviously they do sit on a lot of assets that they've frankly not touched for a number of years, and they're looking to at least entice those people back. So as a result of that, even those sort of forward-thinking tech companies are re-looking at their corporate real estate strategies. Then I think from the other sort of bursting and emerging sector for us as a business in the US, and it's globally, frankly, is data centers. It definitely has some challenges to the point where you literally can't build them quick enough, and there's many reasons which we'll, I'm sure, talk about throughout today's call, such as power supply and labor and skills shortages. But the data center sector for us, even from Turton Bond's perspective as a business, is one that we're truly focused on and are growing rapidly. So I think the final thing I'd just say from the American perspective is the just thinking about what's happening in the next couple of years, right? We've got the World Cup coming, the football World Cup. I can't bring myself to say soccer just yet, despite having lived here for over 10 years. So we've got the World Cup coming. You've obviously got the Summer Olympics as well. So there's going to be a lot of infrastructure invested and needs to be over the next couple of years. So it's pretty exciting, and yeah, looking forward to seeing how it shapes out.
And just as a quick follow-up on that, I mean, everything I read about housing in the US, and I do read quite a lot about it, suggests that the affordability is a big challenge, and in certain cities, delivery is a challenge. Not across necessarily everywhere in the country, but there are certain issues. I mean, do you see any signs that that's shifting?
It is in the sense, look, obviously I'm speaking from New York, right? So the New York housing situation is obviously very different to somewhere like in Arkansas. But as a result, if you imagine, America is similar to Europe in a way, in that every state is effectively its own country with its own rules. So there's a lot of government incentives being put into place for tax abatements and things like that to really incentivize the developers. So that's something we're seeing a lot of, especially here in New York with some of those high-rise developments, saying portions of them need to be for affordable for certain demographics, and then as a result, you can leverage those tax abatements.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, how are you seeing things?
I feel like I am gonna lose a bet for being the first person to say the word tariff on this call. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think echoing kind of what Kirk and Holly said, where the industry and businesses and investors really want certainty, we're seeing a lot of uncertainty here. Um, we have tariffs coming and going and changing percentages and being paused and reinstated, kind of like just on a whim, which is we're seeing cause a lot of uncertainty. I think one kind of positive aspect that we're seeing come out of it is we're seeing clients with big capital spend really dig into, like, ask for data and try to figure out what the impact of those tariffs actually will be, instead of it just being some scary big unknown, trying to get a little bit of certainty, even if it, it means that things are going to cost more. But I think we're seeing people put a little bit more effort into planning, looking back at historic data, trying to understand economic trends in the past and how that impacted construction costs in 2017, 2018, and drawing that forward. So I think that kind of that data approach and spending more time planning will help the industry going forward. Hopefully, we're not going to be in a situation where things are changing daily and we need to like have full teams that are on this. But we're seeing a lot of uncertainty, but we're also seeing, like Will said, the data center sector is like, it has not slowed down. With AI growing, we need infrastructure for that. So data centers and infrastructure both are kind of growth sectors despite tariffs, despite cost uncertainty, despite all these changing circumstances. And so I think in general, we are kind of cautiously optimistic looking to the rest of the year. And then looking to our neighbors to the north and south, I think the uncertainty and the tariffs are impacting them as well, trying to find new trade agreements or maybe negotiate with the US to come up with updated trade agreements. We're already seeing some shipping delays in ports, which I think will have or lower amounts of cargo being delivered, which I think will have a ripple effect through the U.S., through Canada, through Mexico. So I don't think we're out of the clear. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty, but people are kind of figuring out how to live in this environment and still succeed.
Thank you. Yeah, look, it does feel a lot more volatile, I suppose, just inevitably with sort of a lot of the chopping and changing that we're seeing. But thank you for that, Rachel. We'll come back to some of those issues. Laik, are you on the line?
Hi, everyone. Yes,
I,
I'm here. Sorry, actually, there's some problem in my camera. I'm
Okay,
unable
that's not a
to.
problem. That's not an issue. I mean, really, when I listen to the other panelists, I mean, there's cautious optimism, there's talk of uncertainty. I would imagine, though, in KSA and other sort of Gulf economies, things are a lot more upbeat. What is that correct?
It is. It is. And but I mean, I will start with some positive note, and I would say that as of 2025, I mean, particularly I will talk about the Saudi Arabia and of course the other Middle East countries such as UAE and Qatar. But more specifically, Saudi Arabia construction industry is performing, I would say, exceptionally well, especially driven by the Vision 2030. So there are lots of, as you all will be aware about the mega projects and the strong pipeline of the public and the private investment, which is including development, infrastructure, and the tourism. So there are lots of construction giga projects are at the moment in the pipeline, and the more prominent, which most of the world known as like NEOM, Red Sea, and the Qiddiya project, or especially the RIA. There are lots of mega and I would say giga projects, and yes, there are some kind of the challenges are there because when any country will go more than you can say the expected construction project, and of course the government is doing their best to control and to provide all kind of assistance what the companies required to complete all these giga projects on time, which is I would say the main challenge we are facing here is Middle East and specifically in Saudi Arabia. It's the shortage of skilled labor, and that I believe I'm sure that the government are working on to resolve that issue and bring more resources in the country to complete all these giga projects on time. And in addition to that, as you all know that the Saudi Arabia they already got they awarded the 2034 World Cup, and that's the next big milestone for us. And for that, of course, we have to develop more infrastructure projects and the tourism. So we are working on that, and of course, since as I said that earlier, we have a lot of project going on, and then likewise we have a challenges as well to cope up.
Mm. Thank you for that. Yes, certainly, as I say, the feedback to our global monitor from KSA as well as UAE is, really sort of stand out positive. So certainly
Yes.
sentiment wise, we're getting very positive responses. I'm conscious
Mm.
of the time, so I think I'm going to jump onto this issue of skills actually, because I think it's sort of the nub of what I think I would like to spend the next 20 minutes or so talking about. Again, can I remind anyone who's sort of listening into this that we want it to be as interactive as possible? Please do put some questions in the chat. So, I mean, look, perhaps I'll start with you, Holly, because I'm sort of thinking of I'm perhaps a little bit more familiar with the challenges in the UK. They're not just about skills, because clearly, planning has been a big issue, and that is being addressed through the planning and infrastructure bill. Or you may want to say a few words about that as well. But I mean, having done that, then I would really be interested to know whether you're seeing skills as a problem at the moment, or is it perhaps less of a problem simply because workloads are sort of a bit flat? Um,
Well, it's certainly an issue, and I'm sure many of our panelists are going to be echoing this sentiment. So we had some really good statistics from the Office for National Statistics in March, and that showed us that in construction, there are more than 35,000 job vacancies in construction and infrastructure. And part of the surveys that they complete have reported that more than half of those vacancies, they can't be filled because of a lack of required skills. Now, that's the highest rate of any sector in the UK. So this question of getting the right skills in the right place at the right time is really a persistent issue within construction in the UK. So we have had some changes in the spring statement. So for those of you who follow UK politics, the government have made some commitment in investing in training for occupations like bricklayers, like electricians, like carpenters, those trades who are really going to help you do things like build houses and cover cross sector. But it's worth calling out that there's some real pinch points within sectors. So we all talked in our introduction about big power and utilities pipelines, but if we think about the folks who are actually delivering those, so overhead lines operatives, for example, that's a real key trade, very specialist, and there just aren't that many of those people to go round. So we do see within some sectors real pinch points that impact a critical path of the ability of those projects to be delivered. And it's really useful to have a global panel, because if we think about sectors like nuclear, sectors like defence, where what you might be constructing is very similar across geographies, we're then talking about a global or an international skills pool. And there's real competition for those high level skills that are needed to deliver those. We think about new nuclear, for example, the skills that are needed to deliver those mega programs, you are competing internationally for the people that you need in order to deliver those. And the long delivery periods for them makes them sort of once, possibly twice in a career projects for the people that are involved. So we're talking about a very small pool, and that does continue to be a real challenge in infrastructure delivery.
and does the announcement yesterday by the Prime Minister around migration have any bearing on sort of your thoughts, the conversation we're having here?
It's obviously too early to tell, but yes, it's definitely one of those factors that has the potential to impact the industry. So if we think about, it's a few years ago now, but what happened as a result of the UK leaving the EU, there was real significant impact, particularly in London, around the numbers of operatives that were available to work on construction sites. So we saw in fact, I have the stats to hand. So EU-born workers who were working in London pre-Brexit, we saw a decline in 30% of those operatives as a result of us leaving the EU. So 2019, we had around 76,000 folks who were born in the EU working on London projects. And in 2020, pre-pandemic, that had come down to 53,000. So given our reliance on that international resource pool, anything that impacts push or pull factors in migration does have the potential to impact available skills.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, Rachel, when we conducted our last survey, and as we know, things are moving by the day. I would usually say by the week or something, but they do move by the day at the moment. We got a very sharp rise in the proportion of respondents from the US were highlighting skill shortages, and I wondered whether that was partly a result of some of the debate about migration. So, I mean, were we capturing something that was really happening, or is it just the fear that this might happen? I mean, how are you seeing the whole skills issue?
I think it's a mix. So I think it is happening, but there is also a lot of fear from the administration and their push to with immigration laws and tightening the rules there. The construction workforce is about, I think, 30% immigrants normally in the US. I don't know the stats of how many of those are maybe undocumented or not here with the proper paperwork, but I'm guessing it's a significant percent, and those people are now either be like they're being removed or pressured to leave the country, which in an industry where we're already struggling with finding enough labor, that's going to just make it an even bigger challenge in the coming years for us.
And I mean, I assume the industry is lobbying the administration and trying to sort of see if there's sort of ways in which there's sort of avenues to sort of at least sort of keep some of the labor that is required for some of the programs.
Yeah, I would assume that's happening. I don't know, Will, if you have
Yeah,
anything to add there.
I think I would echo what Rachel said. I think as well, without sort of wading into any political waters. I think also from the union and the lobbying perspective, I think there's an element of not wanting to rail too much against the administration. So I think they're still looking, and the administration are probably more advocates of US based labor, and obviously that's not an overnight solution, as we know, right? It's going to take time, and I think the things that we're looking for and what are being advocated for is that investment into the vocational training, and also like just frankly a little bit of a shift in perception, right, of the construction industry in general as a viable career for sort of maybe it's the younger generation, because I do think wrongly it hasn't got the best perspective, and people don't often see what those career potentials could be, and especially now with the new and emerging technologies, without getting too philosophical, it could actually be something pretty cool and exciting to pitch to that younger generation that we kind of need to build what we're looking to build over the next few years.
When I hear that, Will, it just really echoes with the conversations that we have in the UK. But I sort of worry that these are global conversations, and I'm not sure the industry knows how to resolve it. This image issue is one that constantly comes up, and when I think about the ambitions for the sector, you begin to wonder whether or not it's realistic, to assume that whether it's infrastructure delivery or housing delivery can be met, given this uniform response that we're getting around the difficulties of finding not just skilled, I mean, trades I don't use it in a negative way at all, but skilled trades and professionals into the industry. While we're looking at the US, one of the questions that did come in was about funding increases for infrastructure. I mean, what is the source of this cash? Is it going to be government funded? Is it private? Where is the money coming from to support the infrastructure drive?
Well, it's going to be a combination, I think, of the government and private. I think probably similar to the UK, at least when I was there was the PPP, was it? And I don't know to what levels of success they've had. I know obviously they got projects built, but looking again from the outside looking in, I don't know the full effects and benefits of doing that. I think if you went audited some of those, I don't know whether or not the numbers would fully stack up with what was initially proposed. But I know that again, everything like those government funding, unfortunately, it does become weaponized and politicized a little bit. So what was possibly proposed by a previous administration the new administration may come in and have a different view. And I don't know, Rachel, if you're seeing similar things on that front.
Yeah, I think we were kind of worried about the Infrastructure and Jobs Act when the administration changed, and we are seeing some funding kind of pulled back or being made more difficult to obtain here. But I think some of the cities and states that were planning the most investment with that kind of are their states where their congressmen are Republican. So I think they have a little bit more bargaining power to push to keep some of that funding to support some of those big infrastructure projects. But yeah, I think like Will said, it will be a mix.
Okay, thank you. Look, Kirk, one of the questions that came in was, and was about Germany and stability. So I wouldn't mind just tackling that one first. Would you agree that Germany doesn't offer the stability anymore? But also, just build on that the issue around skills, because I think the question goes on to see it. Germany's seen a core talent drain. So, I mean, is that something that you would say you're seeing? And if so, I mean, what is the country? How are they going to address that? I remember a program in the UK from, I think it was the 1980s, Auf Wiedersehen Pep, which was all about British bricklayers going to Europe. I suspect that is less of a story today.
Yeah, I think I'll tackle the skilled labor portion of it first, and then I'll get into whether or not Germany is a place where that you would look and invest in it. Is it giving you a nice safe space? With the skilled labor, I think it's a little bit different than everyone else. So because it's in the EU, we obviously have access to all the EU countries. So we get most of our, we'll call it, I don't want to call it unskilled labor, that's probably not proper, but we'll say not the specialist skilled labor, often comes from the old Eastern blocks. And they end up coming, whether or not it's for a couple of weeks, and then they go back. However, the difficulty with this, of course, is different training, also quite often language difficulties, meaning there is a problem with the correspondence and asking what needs to be done. This then leads to potential higher costs because of improperly installed things, as well as because they're not as skilled and the information flow doesn't work as quickly. You also have a lost time involved in this as well. We still see, we'll say, the lack of skilled labor, especially in the MEP trades at this point in time, and this becomes very difficult. Now, this is then compounded by, if I take a look at France and Germany, they're very old school and they're very country specific. So because they have very rigid specifications set up as to what do the architects do, what do the engineers do, what do the construction companies do, compared to when the international companies are coming in and asking it for the typical Anglo-Saxon way, or the way that we do it in the US, EPC, EPCM, all of these various different things. That's a massive struggle. So what we've seen in the past, where everything was booming, was you had a lot of, when Brexit happened, Irish contractors moving in, especially in the data center space, coming in because what the clients wanted was they wanted it their way. They wanted it fast. They didn't want to hear no for an answer. And that was very different compared to what the French and the German type contractors, who are used to saying, this isn't possible, this is what is going to end up happening. In the past year, 2 years, that's shifted because the market is not as great as it was. There's not as many projects. You're seeing a lot of the German and French contractors now trying to move into the space. You're seeing medium contractors moving up into large projects, small contractors moving into medium. But this exasperates the skilled labor problem, because now you don't only have the skilled labor problem, you have actually companies moving into areas and sectors that they haven't done before and doing it in a way they haven't done before. So that leads to difficulties, challenges, and that's kind of where we're sitting at right now. Some, and especially the large, we'll say native construction companies, are figuring it out. We, as Turner and Townsend, often become the translator, the one in between, to figure out how do we go in the middle from what the client wants and what the contractors can deliver. So it's a little bit away from the skilled labor. But it does actually really come into, because what's happening is they're asking for even the skilled labor to do things that they haven't ever done in the past because the clients want in a certain way. So that's kind of what we're seeing in the Central Europe type area. Now, as to whether there's a lack of confidence and is Germany going to be the pillar moving forward and the backbone of the EU, a lot of people will end up saying that. Yes, I still believe so. And I believe the 1 trillion invest, I'll keep coming back to that, this commitment from Germany to say, we are there. We are going to upskill. They're talking about the housing market. They're talking about how do we get people who don't want to get their hands dirty back into the construction industry. So yes, it is on a downturn, but we always see that in macroeconomics. You can't have the up if you don't have the down. So I do believe that it will be, but there is a blip at this point in time. So a lot of it is the questions, what will happen? And I think the next 6 months to 1 year will be very important to gain that confidence back across the world.
Okay, thank you. Is Laik, are you online?
Yes, yes, I'm available.
Oh, you are. Sorry, because I know you tried to get your camera working.
Yeah,
Look, I mean,
it's
if
weird.
if there was I mean, I know that we've talked a little bit there about sort of uh, you know, sort of some Eastern European workers perhaps moving into Germany and support, particularly perhaps the
Mhm.
more general sort of labour type skills. But if there was if that program that was so sort of closely watched in the 1980s were to be remade about sort of construction workers working overseas, I suspect the home would be sort of Saudi or the UAE. I mean, to what extent are you still seeing a lot of workers from overseas being drawn to these markets? And you'll see that there are questions online which talk about whether or not there are skills related issues in quantity surveying, cost management. Where is the challenge in terms, if there are any challenges in terms of trying to still trying to attract skills, or is it sort of something that you're finding that is less of a problem at the moment?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I will split this question in two. First, I will explain you about the labor shortage, which we call it like the blue collar or the laborers which are the tradesmen. So due to, as I just said it earlier, the mega projects and the giga projects going on across Saudi Arabia and in UAE and some extent and in Qatar as well. So of course we first of all the labor shortage is huge. That's a big challenge which all the construction projects are facing, and there's some kind of a cause of a delay on those projects because the companies, especially specifically, I would say when I say about the contract with the labor, I'm talking about the contracting company. They are facing issue to bring labor in the country from different region, and as you will know that Middle East countries usually depend on the South Asian labor market or nearing Arab countries, for example, Egypt and India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. So there are some kind of a visa issues to bring more labor in the country to expedite the project and meet the target deadlines. And at the same time, if I talk about the technical aspect with the project manager, engineer, and then more specifically the quantity surveyors, cost and commercial management, which is a backbone of the construction companies, and especially like myself, if I'm working for Mace and we are providing the project management service, contracts and commercial and cost services. So we are also facing the same issue that we need more people because to meet the requirement of our clients in Saudi Arabia and also the other neighboring Middle East country. And we are at the moment facing this problem to bring them in the country to work here. And at the same time, there are a huge demand and expectation from the client to meet their requirement, which required enhancing of further training to the people. So what we also doing is here my role comes as a two part. One is as an employee, as employer for the to work for the client, and also as rigs. So what we doing, I will just split again this question in the two part, that as a rigs, what we are doing is we are approaching to the various universities in town, and we are start providing them a training and a guidance to the fresh graduates that once they complete their, or they're about to complete their graduate degree, whether it's any discipline is mechanical or civil or electrical, how they can join the industry, what specific role they can adopt, what RICs can provide training in a different pathway, like a facility management, project management, and the quantity surveying and the cost management. So we are trying to provide that kind of a guidance on that stage. Then when the workforce will enter in the market, they know where they have to go and what kind of a certification and the courses they have to complete before they enter in the construction market. So that's the one aspect. And the secondly, for those who are already working in the industry, they also need to enhance their knowledge. And then again, we are providing them a different of training sessions locally, so they can upgrade their skills like a BIM expertise, or the various costing softwares to expedite the costing, the cost planning and the cost estimation and of the post contract side. So yes, there are challenges for the labor, there are challenges for the technical tradesmen and the senior management. So these are the big challenge, and I'm sure when we meet from the different government entities, they are working to resolve that, because without their support, these projects will not be able to complete. And definitely government are very quick to complete that, because this is the vision of 2030. So we are expecting more support from the government, of course, all these projects to be completed on time with this shortage of labor.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, just listen to that. There is a fairly consistent message, and I just want to quickly go back to, I think Will talked about image. I think I'm right in saying you mentioned that word. But I mean, do you see? I mean, how do you see this changing? I mean, who is responsible for the change? You know, is it professional bodies? Is it the industry? Is it government? Who's going to? Because there does seem to be quite a consistent message, as we said right at the outset, but it does seem to be a pretty consistent message that, you know, skills are a challenge now, and we haven't really geared up. I mean, with the exception possibly of what Laik was saying, you know, in most markets we aren't anywhere near gearing up to where we want to be in terms of delivery. So, you know, how are we going to, you know, make that change? Is there enough momentum with the various sort of discussions that are going on about training and the rest of it to actually move a needle, or do we need something more dramatic? I don't know. I mean, Will, did you have any thoughts? Just because you did mention
Yes,
image.
exactly. There's first of all entities, they are participating and playing their effective role to resolve these gaps, like the government support, the professional institutes like RIGS and CIB and other, and on the stakeholder with the companies like other companies such as Mays and Turner Towns and FNG, Faithful and Golden and all. So what we are doing is government, they are supporting the institution to provide trainings, courses, and certifications, which we at the different institution, we are filling that gap. At the same time, the companies, they are hiring the fresh graduates from the university and providing them a training and giving them an opportunity to work in a different pockets of the company, like work in the planning team, the project control team, and the cost commercial and the construction team. So then they will get experience, mixed experience, and that will help them to decide their career in future. Okay, where they want to move on, is
Yeah,
either they want
yeah.
to be pursue their career in the cost and construction. So I believe everyone contributing and try their level best.
Okay, thank you. Kirk, I think you wanted to add something on this issue.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is we need to split up between, an MEP specialist who might be on site installing certain things compared to what Leek's talking about, which might be quantity surveying or getting into BIM specialists and all that. I think they're two very different scenarios. Now, I think one of the biggest things that we've noticed in Germany is just getting the information out there that these are career paths. So in Germany and in Austria, and there is no really quantity surveying or specialist along these lines. It all goes into architecture and engineers. And that's basically the thought pattern of where it goes. So we go into schools. We actually hold regulars every 3 months. We invite students to come in and we explain to them the various career paths that are open. It's incredible the feedback that we get because it's never known. And I think this is one of the biggest things that isn't, we'll say, in the non-typical Anglo-Saxon areas that are waiting on those Anglo-Saxon type of specialist SMEs, I guess you would call them. We have to get out there into the universities and even possibly earlier to show them this is a career path. This is something that you can do from now on until you retire, because that is not even known. So we're trying to do it as much as we can, but I think it's on the entire backs of the industries to go out there, to publish, to talk, to show and say, this is a great industry to get into. It's not going anywhere. We're going to actually be growing. You're also going to be getting into computers. You got artificial intelligence that's coming in. How do we do it? We need people coming in, smarter than probably everyone on this panel, because the young people understand it better than we do. I put myself in the older people type of stuff. And we need these people to come in, because too many people hear construction. I'm going to get my hands dirty. I better not. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to change.
That's a really interesting point, and I think that's a good segue into sort of thinking about what the emerging skills will be, because obviously, as you highlighted there, this industry is changing. It's not it's not what it was, and it doesn't mean you're walking around necessarily with a hard hat. It may do, but it may not. So I'm just thinking, Holly, perhaps we'll start with you on this. I mean, if you were to think about what the skills of the future, what's the construction industry going to look like? What sort of people does it need? How is it going to attract those people? Because in a way, listening to Kirk, it could be super exciting, really.
Yeah, and I love those reflections from Kirk. Thank you. And I, completely agree with the outreach work that some of my colleagues do with people entering the profession, just really being ambassadors for what a fantastic career it can be. But I think, Simon, coming back to where you started this call, it's a time of great change in the industry, and the way that things are done will be different in the future. We have had a long conversation today about skills new entrants into the construction industry. But I think we do also have to consider the issue of productivity of the people that we might already have in the industry and the way that they do their work. And then also, if we think about design for manufacturing, assembly and modern methods of construction, changing the way that construction is done so that it needs perhaps fewer or different skills from both those on-site operatives, as Kirk was explaining, or those professions, as Laik was outlining. So I think in both of those areas, if I perhaps talk to design for manufacturing assembly first, so there's definitely going to be some people on the call who are Manchester United supporters, but if we think about their new stadium that's being built in the UK, cops of disclosure there. Now, they have publicly said initially that they are going to use it's called prefab in the trade press, but really that's a factory-based approach, given that idea that it's just going to need fewer on-site operatives to construct that. It means they're going to have more confidence in the time and the cost that's needed to deliver that. And it also means that the skills that are needed to do that will be different. You will find many of those components built inside a factory by people on some version of a production line. And that looks very different to some of those on-site skills in more traditional occupations. And then if we think about improving sort of productivity of folks within the industry, I think it's the flat line of UK productivity is well known as a statistic, but we are now in generation AI, and we are starting to see organisations bring that into their normal working practices to change the way that they are going about work. So using things like generative AI, using large language models, it will change the nature of work that is done. And I think then taken in combination with design for manufacture and assembly, it makes potentially what it means to be an architect can be quite different in the future. Certainly what it means to be a QS in the future may look different. So we're on that learning curve of what might those skills look like. But we know that they will be different, given that the way that construction is done is probably going to be different to address some of the challenges we've talked about.
And do you think that the industry is sort of selling this much more exciting vision effectively? Because if you talk about it in these terms, it seems a lot of young people might be really quite wowed by the prospect of working in construction.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think as a surveyor, I'd say we could always do more to be more visible about the fantastic things that we're working on, and the exciting things that we get to do in our day jobs. But just shout out to everybody who's entering the industry and starting their careers using those AI tools and teaching me something different every day, because they are fantastic ambassadors for the industry, and how exciting it can be.
Thank you. Rachel, looking at it from your perspective in the US, I mean, how are you seeing this sort of this vision around sort of the emerging skills that are required? Is it something that is, that the industry is really promoting effectively, and are younger people perhaps finding that opportunity something that they're attracted by?
I do hear it talked about more, so I think we're doing we're, we're doing our best. I think, like, echoing what people have said, like, we could probably always be doing more to attract young people to our industry. It's been a problem, like the skills shortage has been a problem for years, and hearing like we need to invest in attracting more labor, we need to invest in attracting young people to the trades and to the professional side of it. I've been hearing that, so like we clearly haven't solved it, but I think we're going in the right direction. And then I think just maybe going to the first part of what Holly was saying about prefabrication, I think we're seeing a lot of opportunity there. One, to improve labor productivity, but two, we're seeing more large, manufacturing, kind of prefab manufacturing buildings built to support the industry, um, which could help not just productivity, but it could help possibly attract more labor. In that you can find one of those that's near to your house. You can work there. You don't have to chase work all over the country. Like owners are trying to make projects more repeatable so that they can use that to increase productivity, to decrease costs. So you have that steady stream of work without having to be a traveler or spend your time away from your family. So I think that kind of marketing that side of it is also something that I'm hearing more about and seeing more about, and hopeful that that will help some of our challenges in the US.
Okay, thank you. Will, can I just take this back onto this issue of productivity in the sector? Because I don't know if you saw, a report from McKinsey. I think it was a few months ago, but they highlighted the issues once again. I mean, this is not the first time they've done it. It's a fairly regular sort of focus of theirs, but they certainly were drawing attention to the global challenge around productivity in the sector. We often think it's a UK problem, but they were sort of demonstrating that this is something that is truly global. And I just was wondering whether it's sort of, is it partly because of the fragmented nature of the industry? Is it something that, is just, a function of perhaps some of the more fundamental issues around construction, or is the industry being somewhat tardy in adopting some of the technologies that could really drive higher productivity levels?
Yeah, I'd say all of the above, which is the easy answer. But like certainly even just from my perspective as a business owner, right? Our team is relatively younger demographic, so probably similar to Holly when you mentioned the fact that that younger demographics teaches me daily to that embracing of technology. And I already think that we're a relatively forward-thinking company and do embrace technology quite willingly. But the stuff that the newer generation seems to be coming up with is truly impressive, and I do feel like that is something that we're leaning into quite heavily as a business and relying on our staff to sort of combat that productivity problem, if you will. I think then on maybe it's like the actual physical construction side, I think it does come back to, again, what the folks have mentioned with regards to that prefab model. And I know, look, extreme example, but actually a really interesting one was one where we work with an aviation client who they effectively are doing a kit of parts almost already. It's wherever they build these airport hangars, they do the same thing everywhere. Now, what was interesting is the people who own this aviation company, they're not construction companies, but they then think about how to approach it with a non-construction mindset, which was actually very, very interesting from our side. Like, it was going well beyond prefabrication. It's literally trying to address all of, like, effectively create their own tailored construction teams that they could basically put everywhere around the country and fly in, fly out. But obviously that has a big impact depending on if they're flying skilled labor from overseas. But I think that prism of looking at these problems from somebody who actually doesn't work within the industry is something that we should also embrace and think about. Like, don't just always take construction experts. Let's take somebody from a different sector altogether to also take a look at our productivity problem and see what they can opine on, because I guarantee you they'll come up with some good solutions, probably far better than mine.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case, but I think certainly, some industries perhaps have been more successful in perhaps applying some of the modern, the technologies to deliver that productivity uplift. So there's clearly some benefit from at least having that conversation. I mean, we've got a question that's come in just now, another question, which is about the future of utilizing advanced technologies in construction, specifically 3D concrete printing. I don't know if anybody wanted to respond to that one. Any takers?
Yeah, someone hi, it's like here. Sorry, actually, because
Yeah.
of camera off, that's why I just okay. So 3D printing, I would say that we have adopted here. We have done some projects in Saudi and UAE as well. Of course, that's not, I would say, very big projects or big buildings, but like few mosques and offices, small buildings constructed using the 3D technology. This is a sector which really want to to government and the stakeholder to pay attention on, because if the 3D models will be more effective and be more largely used, that will somehow, I mean, not somehow, that will definitely help these projects to be complete on time if we can use the 3D printing, 3D modeling on the ongoing projects. So yes, we are using it here in the Middle East.
Okay, interesting. And is it being applied anywhere else? Any other takers on that one? If not, sorry, I was going to
I was
ask.
just going to say not really in Germany, and if so, in
Okay,
very small areas.
okay,
But once again, it's a very conservative construction culture
yeah.
here.
While you're on, Kirk, just as I'm mindful of time, someone raised the issue of decarbonisation in the construction sector. I mean, is that still a big issue? I mean, obviously the debate around net zero is shifting like so many other things. I mean, how big, how much, is it at the forefront of the industry's minds at the moment, or is it something that's perhaps being pushed to the side a little bit?
So I'm going to use a nice German word called Jein, which is yeah and no all at once. So in certain circles, absolutely, but it usually comes from the clients. Now, what we're missing in a lot of we'll call Central Europe, is the requirement through the government for them to mandate having to do these things. So it comes back to, do we renovate something and actually strip it down and try to keep the frame structure and build it back up, even though it's more expensive, but it's better on the carbon footprint. And a lot of times, without the mandate behind it, what ends up happening is the clients choose the economically more viable option, which is rip it down and build it new. You will have some clients, especially ones that will say are very public, who will choose to spend the more money, but it's not happening often enough, I would say, in Central Europe. But it is starting to become more the norm, but I would still say we've got a long way to go here.
Okay, thank you. And can we just quickly, because I'm mindful of time, get a sort of a two-word answer on this question, same question from all the other panelists. So if I go up to Holly, I mean, decarbonisation still at the forefront, or is it less so?
Mixed across clients, but largely yes.
Largely yes. Okay, thank you. Will, what are you seeing on this front?
Same, mixed across clients, but also mixed across states, right? Obviously within the US, some states are more open to it than others.
Yeah. Okay, Rachel?
Yep, we'll got it. Mixed and really driven by state.
Okay, thank you. And Lake, final word from you on this one?
Yes, absolutely yes. And we are working on for net zero and less carbon. So yes, we are working very hard on that.
So it
And the
sounds like
government initiative, there's government
you.
support.
It sounds like it's perhaps a stronger story in KSA.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, look,
Maybe I can talk a lot, but I know. But yes, the answer in short, yes, we are working on.
brilliant. Okay, thank you. And I'm certainly would like to come back to that subject in the future. Look, we've had a lot of questions coming in, and we've got through most of them, not all of them, but I've done my best here. But we will try and answer any ones that we haven't got through over the coming weeks. Thank you so much, all of you, for dialing in, listening, and then contributing. Big thank you to the panel as well, because it's been a really great conversation, and obviously literally could have gone on for another hour. So um, really big thank you to you guys, and hopefully we'll do it again. Um, just a quick reminder that we will be publishing a recording of this of this session. There will be hopefully a write-up as well, which we'll be able to circulate in due course. We would obviously want you to share these with your professional networks. That will be very helpful. There will be a poll at the end of this webinar just to find out your thoughts on how it went and what you would like to see more of or less of. So please do, if you have the time, fill that in. And while we're talking of polls, we really do want you to complete that skills survey I've referenced earlier, because it will help us. And obviously there's been a lot of debate in the last hour about skills and the emerging skills and who should help to support the development of those skills. So we really want to get your thoughts on that. So again, the link is in the chat, and if you took a picture of the QR code, you can use that option. We do have a number of webinars still coming up on the WebF platform, and I think there will be a slide showing you the two that are remaining. There's the 4th of June on data centers, which was mentioned early on in this particular webinar, and I'd like to have got back to it, but we didn't. And then also a bit about circularity in construction. So please do take the opportunity to sign up for those. And if you do require any further information around the work that we're doing, you can find it on the RICS WebF platform, or website, I should say. So please do just log on to that, and you can find lots of commentary around some of the themes that we've talked about today, and also more general information about some other really relevant issues for the built environment. So look, big thank you for everyone again for dialing in, for contributing to today's session. I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you again soon.